The refugee camp stretched across the wasteland like a scar that refused to heal, its tents shuddering beneath winds that carried ash and grief in equal measure. In the market square where desperation wore 1,000 faces, a human soldier watched an alien mother drag her daughter's wheelchair through mud, calling out a price that made his stomach turn. The girl sat motionless, her lavender skin catching the dying light, her eyes fixed on nothing as her mother's voice grew hoarse with bargaining. But when the soldier stepped forward with his last month's rations clutched in trembling hands, the girl's gaze found his, and in that moment something shifted that neither the camp nor the galaxy would forget. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode will challenge everything you thought you knew about sacrifice. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. The market square of Camp 17 smelled like rust and desperation. Sergeant David Korr had learned to breathe through his mouth during his 3rd week here, when the wind carried smoke from the cremation pits at the camp's edge. Now, 6 months into his deployment, he barely noticed the stench anymore. What he noticed were the faces. Thousands of them. Alien refugees from a war humanity had no part in starting but somehow couldn't stop joining. The Varillian species, tall and elegant even in their defeat, moved through the market with the careful dignity of the starving. Their skin ranged from pale violet to deep indigo, and their eyes, those enormous eyes with pupils that shifted like oil on water, tracked everything with the wariness of prey. Korr walked the perimeter of the square, rifle slung across his back, boots heavy with the clay that passed for soil on this forsaken moon. His unit rotated guard duty through the market because fights broke out when hunger met commerce. Today felt different. The crowd parted around something near the eastern stalls, a pocket of silence in the chaos. He moved toward it, instinct tightening his jaw. In the center of the widening circle, a Varillian woman stood beside a wheelchair. Her robes, once fine, hung threadbare from her shoulders. Her face held the kind of beauty that survives devastation. Sharp cheekbones and full lips set in an expression of carved stone. But it was the figure in the wheelchair that stopped Korr cold. A girl, perhaps 16 in human years, though he'd learned Varillian aging didn't map neatly to his own. Her hair fell in waves of silver white, and her skin glowed with that characteristic lavender hue that darkened to purple at her fingertips. Her legs lay still beneath a thin blanket, and her hands rested in her lap like dead birds. She didn't look at the gathering crowd. She looked at nothing. The mother's voice cut through the market noise, sharp and businesslike. 17 ration chits, or equivalent. Barter, she cannot walk, but her hands work. She can sew, can clean, can cook, if you teach her your foods. Korr's stomach dropped. He'd heard of this, families selling their weak to survive, but he'd never witnessed it. Never stood close enough to see the girl's chest rise and fall with breath that seemed too calm for someone being auctioned like livestock. A Varillian merchant stepped forward, his scales catching the light like hammered copper. He circled the wheelchair once, examining the girl the way Korr had seen livestock traders examine cattle back on Earth. The girl didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her stillness was so complete, it seemed carved from something denser than flesh. 10 chits, the merchant said, his voice a rumble that vibrated through his chest. She's broken. I'll use her for kitchen work. The mother's jaw tightened. 17. Her mind is sound. Her hands are skilled. Another figure approached. This one human. A supply sergeant Korr recognized from the depot. A man named Vickers who'd been reprimanded twice for black market dealings. 12 chits and a medical kit. Vickers offered, his eyes traveling over the girl in a way that made Korr's hands curl into fists. I could use help organizing inventory. The mother considered, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. The girl's expression remained empty, as if her soul had already left, and only the shell remained for bartering. Korr felt his feet moving before his mind caught up. He pushed through the crowd, aware of his unit watching from their posts. Jenkins caught his eye and shook his head slightly. Don't get involved. Don't make it personal. Korr had survived 8 months on this moon by following that advice. He stopped in front of the wheelchair. Up close, he could see the girl's eyes weren't empty at all. They were watching everything with the focus of someone memorizing the moment for a trial that hadn't happened yet. Her mother looked at him, measuring. "You wish to bid, soldier?" Korr's hand went to the pouch at his belt. His ration chits, the physical currency that kept him fed between supply drops. He had 19 left. It was supposed to last 3 more weeks. 20 chits, he heard himself say. The crowd murmured. Vickers laughed, a sound like gravel in a disposal. "You're buying Crippled alien tail with your food money, Korr. Your mama would be proud." Korr ignored him. He counted out 20 chits into his palm, the plastic discs warm from being against his body. The mother stared at the chits, then at him. "Why?" she asked, and for the first time her voice cracked. Korr didn't have an answer, or he had too many. Because nobody should be sold. Because the girl's eyes reminded him of his sister's eyes the day she'd asked him not to deploy. Because he was tired of watching and doing nothing. "Does it matter?" he said. The mother's hand trembled as she took the chits. She knelt beside the wheelchair, and for a heartbeat Korr thought she might change her mind. Instead, she pressed her forehead to her daughter's temple and whispered something in Varelian that sounded like "goodbye" and "forgive me" braided into one word. The wheelchair had a broken axle that made it pull left. Korr learned this in the first 10 meters as he pushed it away from the market square, the girl's weight shifting with each uneven rotation. Behind him, he heard Vickers laughing, the sound carrying across the camp like crows over a battlefield. Jenkins fell into step beside him, his rifle cradling easy in his arms. "You just traded 3 weeks of food for a girl who can't walk," Jenkins said quietly. "Want to tell me what the plan is?" Korr didn't answer because he didn't have one. His barracks were a corrugated metal box he shared with 3 other soldiers, each man's space defined by a footlocker and a cot. There was no privacy, no room for mercy that came with complications. "I'll figure it out," Korr said. Jenkins looked at the girl, then back at Korr. "Captain's gonna hear about this. You know that." Korr knew. He pushed the wheelchair toward the barracks anyway, feeling the girl's stillness like a held breath against his hands. The afternoon sun beat down through thin clouds, turning the camp into a griddle. Sweat ran down Korr's spine, soaking his uniform. The girl didn't speak, didn't turn her head. He couldn't tell if she was in shock or if this was simply who she'd learned to be. When they reached the barracks, Korr realized the doorway was too narrow for the wheelchair. He stood there, problem stacking on top of problem, until the girl's voice cut through his thoughts. "You can carry me," she said, in perfect standard, her accent turning the words into something almost musical. It was the first time she'd spoken. Korr came around to face her. Up close, her eyes were the color of storm clouds at sunset, gray and violet swirling together. "You speak standard," he said, stupidly. "My mother taught me many things before she learned what I was," the girl said. Her voice carried no bitterness, which somehow made it worse. Korr crouched and slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back. She weighed almost nothing, as if Varelian bones were hollow like birds. Her head settled against his shoulder, and he felt her breath against his neck, steady and slow. He carried her through the doorway. Inside, the barracks were empty, his unit still on patrol. He set her on his cot, and she arranged herself with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to compensate for a body that didn't obey. Her hands smoothed the blanket. Her legs lay still. "What's your name?" Korr asked. The girl looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether names mattered anymore. "Sarah," she said finally, "and you are the soldier who paid too much." Korr sat on the footlocker across from her, his elbows on his knees. "Yeah," he said. "I'm starting to realize that." Sarah's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we are both learning expensive lessons today." The first 3 days passed in a rhythm Korr hadn't anticipated. He woke before dawn, carried Sarah to the communal washroom before the other soldiers stirred, and left her with water and rations while he reported for duty. His unit said nothing directly, but their silence spoke volumes. Jenkins brought an extra blanket without comment. Vickers made jokes that died in the air when no one laughed. On the fourth day, Captain Okoye summoned him to the command tent. She sat behind a desk made from supply crates, her dark eyes measuring him the way a surgeon measures a wound. "Sergeant Korr," she said, her voice carrying the weight of too many decisions made in impossible situations. "I've been informed you're harboring a refugee in the enlisted barracks." Korr stood at attention. "Yes, ma'am. I purchased her contract in the market." Okoye's eyebrow rose. "Her contract? Is that what we're calling it?" She tapped a stylus against the desk. "There are protocols, Sergeant. Refugees go to the civilian sectors. They're processed, documented, assigned to work details appropriate to their capabilities." Korr knew what the civilian sectors meant. Overcrowded tents, minimal rations, and a waiting list for medical care that stretched months. For someone who couldn't walk, it was a death sentence in slow motion. "With respect, ma'am, she's not taking up space. She stays in my area, eats my rations." Okoye studied him. "You're down 15 pounds since you got here, Sergeant. Medical noted it in your last checkup. Now you're splitting your food with a crippled alien." She leaned back. "I admire the impulse, but this isn't sustainable. She goes to processing by week's end." Korr's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Understood, ma'am." He returned to the barracks knowing he had 4 days to figure out what came next. Sarah sat exactly where he'd left her, hands folded in her lap, but something had changed. On the wall beside, at his cot, faint marks traced patterns in the dust. Symbols, delicate and precise, that looked like star charts written in a language older than sound. "What is that?" Korr asked, crouching to examine the marks. Sarah's hands stilled. "Memory," she said simply. "My people draw what we cannot say aloud." The symbols spiraled outward from a central point, each line connecting to others in ways that suggested meaning beyond decoration. Korr had seen alien writing before, the blocky Varelian script used on supply crates and refugee documentation. This was different. Ancient. "What does it mean?" Sarah's fingers traced the air above the marks without touching them. "It means I was here. It means I saw the stars before they fell. It means my mother chose survival over truth, and both were correct." Her eyes met his. "It means you should not have bought me, soldier, but I am grateful you were fool enough to try." That night, Korr lay on the floor beside his cot, his blanket given to Sarah against the cold. He watched her sleep, her face peaceful in a way it never was while waking. On the wall, the symbols seemed to shimmer in the darkness, and Korr wondered what truth could be worth selling your daughter to bury. On the 5th night, Korr woke to the sound of scratching, soft, rhythmic, like a mouse working at the walls. He opened his eyes to darkness broken only by the emergency lights bleeding through the doorframe. Sarah sat upright on the cot, her upper body twisted toward the wall. Her fingers moved across the metal surface with the patience of someone tracing constellations. More symbols, spreading like vines across the corrugated steel. Korr started to sit up, then stopped. Her eyes were closed. She was drawing in her sleep, or something like sleep, her breath steady and deep, while her hands carved invisible patterns that left faint marks in the dust and grime. He watched for 20 minutes before her hands finally stilled and she settled back down, her body returning to its daytime stillness. In the morning, the wall was covered. Symbols layered over symbols, a language written in absence, each mark precise and deliberate. Jenkins noticed when he came in from night watch. He stood in the doorway, staring, his coffee growing cold in his hands. "Korr," he said quietly, "what the hell is that?" Before Korr could answer, another voice cut through from outside. "Old marks," said a Varelian male, his standard thick with accent. "Very old marks." Korr turned to find an elderly Varelian standing at the threshold, his skin faded to the pale gray of old parchment. He wore the armband of the camp translators, those refugees trusted enough to move between sectors. His eyes were locked on the wall with an expression Korr couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite reverence. Something that combined both and added weight. "You know what this is?" Korr asked. The translator stepped inside, his movements slow and careful. He raised one trembling hand toward the symbols, but didn't touch them. "These are keeper marks," he said. "The old ones. Before the war, before the Exodus, before we learned that some gifts are too dangerous to keep." He turned to look at Sarah, who sat watching him with those storm cloud eyes. "Your mother said you were crippled by accident, by disease." His voice dropped to a whisper. "She lied to save your life." Jenkins set his coffee down. "Want to explain that in terms a human can understand?" The translator's gaze didn't leave Sarah. "Among my people, there are those born with neural pathways that connect to the world differently. They can see patterns others cannot, read the intentions written in matter itself. We called them keepers because they kept the memory of all things." He gestured to the walls. "But in the war, they were weaponized, forced to see and manipulate until their minds burned out. Those who survived were hunted by both sides." Korr felt his chest tighten. "So her mother paralyzed her?" The translator shook at his head. "Her mother did nothing. The girl chose it herself. The paralysis is not physical. It is a lock she placed on her own nervous system to prevent what she can do from being used." He looked at Korr. "But the mind does not sleep, soldier. Even locked, it remembers. It writes." Sarah spoke then, her voice carrying an edge Korr hadn't heard before. "You should leave, Elder Than. Before they ask you questions you cannot afford to answer." Elder Than didn't leave. He sat on the footlocker, his aged joints protesting the movement, and folded his hands in his lap with the formality of someone delivering testimony. Jenkins blocked the doorway, not leaving but not quite staying either, his body language screaming conflict. Korr stood between them all, feeling the barracks shrink around secrets too large for corrugated metal walls. "How long have you known?" Korr asked Sarah. She met his eyes without flinching. "Since I was 8 cycles old. I woke one morning and could read the history, written in my bedroom walls. The arguments my parents had. The fear my mother carried. The day she decided what I was becoming." Her hands lay still in her lap, but her voice carried the weight of years. "By 10 cycles, I could see the patterns in living things, the way neurons fire, the paths they take. I learned I could redirect them if I chose." Than nodded slowly. "The military came for her when she was 12. Her mother claimed she'd had an accident. Spinal damage. Irreversible." He looked at Sarah with something like sorrow. "We believed it because we wanted to believe it." Korr crouched in front of the wheelchair, bringing himself eye level with Sarah. "You've been holding yourself paralyzed for 4 years?" The question sounded absurd even as he asked it. Sarah's lips curved into that not-quite smile. "The body obeys the mind, soldier. I simply convinced mine that my legs had forgotten how to receive signals. It was easier than I expected. The hard part is maintaining it while sleeping." She gestured to the walls. "Which is why I draw. The neural patterns need somewhere to go." Jenkins spoke from the doorway, his voice tight. "So you can walk. You could have walked away from that market, from your mother selling you." The barracks went quiet. It was the question Korr hadn't let himself ask, the one that had whispered through his thoughts every time he'd carried her. Sarah's composure cracked for the first time, something raw flickering behind her eyes before the mask returned. "My mother sold me to save me," she said. "If I had walked, if I had shown what I could do, the military would have taken me within hours. Both sides are still hunting keepers. They would have torn open my mind to use me as a weapon, and when I burned out, they would have discarded me like all the others." Than's voice was gentle but firm. Her mother gave her the one thing that might keep her alive, a reason for the soldiers to overlook her. Who searches for a weapon in a crippled refugee? Korr thought of the mother's face in the market, the tremor in her hand as she took his rations. The whisper that had sounded like goodbye and forgive me. He'd thought he was watching a woman abandon her daughter. He'd been watching a woman cut off her own arm to save the rest of her body. "So what happens now?" Jenkins asked. Captain wants her processed and moved to the civilian sector by tomorrow. Than stood, his movement sudden despite his age. Then she dies. The civilian sectors are monitored. They scan for neural anomalies weekly. They will find her within days, and when they do, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sarah looked at Korr with those storm cloud eyes. You should have let the merchant buy me. He would have worked me until I died quietly. No complications, no danger. Korr felt something harden in his chest. Yeah, he said. I'm bad at making smart choices. Captain Okoye arrived at 0600 with 2 MPs and an expression that said the decision and had already been made. Korr was shaving in the communal washroom when Jenkins found him, breathless from running. They're here for her, Jenkins said. 3 minutes, maybe less. Korr dropped the razor and ran. His boots slapped against the packed earth, his uniform still unbuttoned. He reached the barracks as Okoye was stepping through the doorway, her hand raised to knock on the frame out of courtesy she no longer needed to extend. She saw him coming and held up one hand. Stand down, Sergeant. This isn't a negotiation. Behind her, the MPs waited with the practiced stillness of men who'd removed refugees before. Sarah sat on the cot, dressed in the clean clothes Korr had bartered for, her hair braided back from her face. She looked smaller than usual, or perhaps the moment made her seem that way. On the wall behind her, the symbols seemed to pulse in the morning light. Okoye noticed them and frowned. What is that? Korr positioned himself between the captain and Sarah, knowing it was pointless but doing it anyway. Ma'am, there are circumstances you're not aware of. I'm aware that you've been splitting your rations and losing weight. Okoye interrupted. I'm aware that you violated protocol by housing a refugee outside designated areas. And I'm aware that if I don't transfer her today, I'll have every other bleeding heart in this camp thinking they can do the same. She softened slightly. You meant well, Korr. But this is a military operation, not a charity. She goes to processing. End of discussion. Movement at the edge of the camp drew their attention. A transport vehicle rolled through the gates, escorted by 2 armored trucks. Not standard refugee transport. Military. Okoye's frown deepened. I didn't authorize that. The convoy stopped outside the command tent. From the lead truck emerged a Varelian woman in clean robes that marked her as someone with resources. Someone with pull. Korr's stomach dropped before his mind caught up. Sarah's mother. She walked with purpose, flanked by 2 human officers in uniforms Korr didn't recognize. Intelligence, maybe. Or something worse. Behind them came 3 more figures, Varelian military with the insignia of the old regime, the one humanity was supposedly helping to dismantle. Jenkins appeared at Korr's shoulder. This is bad, he muttered. This is very bad. The group approached the barracks. Sarah's mother stopped 10 feet away, her face a mask of control except for her hands, which trembled at her sides. Captain Okoye, she said in flawless standard. I am Callus Ven. I'm here to report a theft. Okoye's expression went flat. Ma'am, if this is about the transaction in the market, Sergeant Korr he purchased nothing, Callus interrupted, her voice rising. My daughter is not property to be sold. I was drugged, coerced. This human kidnapped her while I was impaired. She pointed at Korr with a shaking finger. I want her returned immediately. One of the intelligence officers stepped forward, his tablet already displaying official documents. We have testimony from 3 witnesses claiming the sergeant threatened the mother if she didn't accept his terms. Given the power imbalance between an armed soldier and a refugee, we're treating this as a potential abduction case. Korr's mind reeled. Every word was a lie wrapped in enough truth to sound plausible. He looked at Sarah, who sat perfectly still, her face betraying nothing. But her eyes, those storm cloud eyes, were screaming. They took Korr to the command tent in restraints. Not cuffs, just the kind of firm grip on each arm that said resisting would make everything worse. Okoye followed, her jaw tight with the kind of anger that came from being blindsided by politics, wearing the face of justice. Through the tent's transparent panels, Korr could see Sarah being loaded into the transport. her wheelchair folded and stowed with the efficiency of people who'd done this before. Callis stood beside the vehicle, her hand on her daughter's shoulder, playing the role of relieved mother with the skill of someone who'd rehearsed it. Inside the tent, the intelligence officer, a man named Walsh with gray at his temples and eyes like arithmetic, gestured to a folding chair. "Sit, Sergeant." Korr sat. His mind churned through everything Than had said, the keepers, the weapons, the hunt. This wasn't about a transaction in a market. This was about retrieving an asset someone had flagged as valuable. Walsh pulled up footage on his tablet, security camera angles from the market square. "Walk me through your thinking here, Sergeant. You see a woman selling her disabled daughter, and your first instinct is to intervene with force." Korr kept his voice level. "There was no force. I made an offer. She accepted." Walsh swiped to another angle, this one showing Korr's hand near his sidearm. A moment Korr barely remembered, a reflexive touch when Vickers had stepped too close. In isolation, it looked like a threat. "That's not what it looks like to me," Walsh said. "That looks like intimidation. A soldier with a weapon making an offer a refugee can't refuse." The tent flap opened. Elder Than entered without invitation, his translator armband catching the light. 2 MPs moved to intercept him, but Okoye held up a hand. "He's authorized personnel." Than addressed Walsh directly. "The girl is not what you think she is, Commander." Walsh's expression sharpened. "And what do I think she is?" Than pulled a small device from his robes and activated it. A hologram flickered to life, medical scans showing neural patterns that looked like galaxies in motion. Varelian keepers. This is what they look like on military scanners. This is why both sides hunt them. Walsh leaned forward. "Where did you get classified files?" Than ignored the question. "The girl holds herself paralyzed to hide what she is. She can rewrite neural pathways with thought alone. Her mother sold her to save her from being weaponized. If she reaches a facility with proper scanning equipment, they will know within hours what she can do." Outside, the transport's engine hummed to life. Korr watched through the panel as Sarah sat in the back, her mother beside her. Then Sarah's head turned, just slightly, to look directly at the tent. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. "Thank you for trying." Walsh reached for his comm device. But before he could speak, an explosion tore through the eastern perimeter. The blast wave shook the tent, and alarms began screaming across the camp. The explosion sent a column of black smoke into the sky. Gunfire erupted along the eastern fence, the sharp crack of rifles mixing with the deeper boom of something heavier. Okoye was moving before the echo faded, shouting orders into her comm. Walsh cursed and ran for the door. The MPs released Korr and followed, weapons drawn. Through the chaos, Korr saw the transport reversing away from the blast zone, its armored hull glinting in the firelight. Inside, Sarah sat perfectly still while her mother shouted something at the driver. The attack wasn't random, it was coordinated. 3 breaches in the fence, figures in mismatched armor pouring through with the efficiency of soldiers who'd done this before. Refugees scattered, screaming. Jenkins appeared at Korr's side, pressing a rifle into his hands. "Whoever they are, they're heading straight for that transport," Jenkins said. Korr's stomach dropped. They weren't here for supplies or hostages. They were here for Sarah. The transport tried to accelerate, but a rocket streaked across the compound and struck the ground in front of it. The vehicle swerved, nearly tipping, then ground to a halt as its front axle shattered. The driver stumbled out, dazed. Kalis threw open the back door and began pulling at Sarah's wheelchair. The attackers closed in, a dozen of them moving with purpose through the chaos. Varelian rebels, Korr realized, or mercenaries, marked with the burned sun insignia of the resistance that had refused the ceasefire. They wanted what both sides wanted. A keeper. A weapon. Korr ran. His boots pounded across the compound, rifle up, as Jenkins and 2 other soldiers followed. He reached the transport as the first attacker grabbed Callis and threw her aside. She hit the ground hard, crying out. The attacker reached for Sarah, and Sarah stood up. Not slowly, not with the trembling uncertainty of someone relearning movement. She rose from the wheelchair like water flowing upward, her legs steady beneath her, her spine straight as a pillar. The attacker froze. Everyone within sight froze. Sarah's eyes had changed. The storm cloud, gray and violet, now blazed with light, pupils dilating and contracting in rapid pulses as if reading data written in the air itself. She raised one hand, fingers spread, and the attacker dropped his weapon. His hands went to his head, clawing at his temples as he screamed. Around the compound, the other attackers faltered. Some fell to their knees. Others ran, their coordination shattered. Sarah turned her gaze across them like a searchlight, and wherever it landed, soldiers crumpled. Not dead. Korr could see them breathing. But their eyes were empty, their bodies slack. She had reached into their minds and turned off the parts that made them dangerous. Kalis sobbed from the ground, not in relief but in horror. Walsh stood at the command tent entrance, his tablet forgotten, staring. Than whispered something that sounded like a prayer. And Sarah looked at Korr with eyes that held galaxies and asked the question that would reshape everything. Now what, soldier? The compound fell silent, except for the crackle of burning wreckage and the moans of incapacitated attackers. Sarah stood beside the ruined transport, her legs steady beneath her, for the first time in 4 years, her eyes still blazing with that terrible light. Kalis crawled toward her daughter, hands outstretched, voice breaking. Sarah, please, lock it back, lock it all back before they see. But they had already seen. Walsh spoke into his calm, his voice tight with controlled urgency. Code 7, repeat, Code 7, asset confirmed active, requesting immediate containment protocols. Okoye moved between Walsh and Sarah, her hand on her sidearm not in threat but in warning. Commander, stand down. She just saved this camp. Walsh's eyes never left Sarah. She just demonstrated weapons-grade neural manipulation. That's not salvation, Captain. That's a security threat. Korr stepped forward, placing himself beside Sarah. His rifle hung loose in his hands, not aimed at anyone but present. A statement. Jenkins moved to his left. Then 2 more soldiers, then 5. A line forming without orders, without discussion. Sarah's gaze swept across them, and Korr saw her eyes flicker with something beyond power. Confusion, maybe, or hope wearing an unfamiliar face. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. I can walk away, disappear. You'll never see me again. Korr thought of her sitting in that wheelchair in the market, her mother's voice turning her into a transaction. He thought of the symbols on the barracks wall, memory written by hands that refused to forget. He thought of her question, now what, soldier, as if he had answers when all he had was the certainty that some things were worth standing for, even when standing made no tactical sense. No, he said. You can't disappear. They'll hunt you. Both sides. Forever. He looked at Walsh, at Okoye, at the growing crowd of soldiers and refugees watching from a distance. But maybe you don't have to run. Than moved through the crowd, his aged frame somehow commanding attention. There is a third option. Sanctuary. Walsh scoffed. There's no sanctuary from this. Every government in the sector wants keepers. Than smiled with the wisdom of someone who'd survived by knowing which rules could bend. The Accord of Navarin. Article 47. Any individual demonstrating unique significance may claim academic asylum if sponsored by a recognized institution. He pulled a data chip from his robes. I represent the Varelian archives in exile. We are recognized by 16 governments, including Earth. He held the chip toward Sarah. We offer protection, not as a weapon, as a scholar. Sarah looked at the chip, then at her mother who wept with her face in her hands, then at Korr who had bought her freedom and stood beside her when standing cost everything. And if I accept? Than's expression softened. Then you teach us to remember. You show us that some gifts are not meant for war. Sarah's eyes dimmed slowly, the light fading until they returned to their natural state. She swayed, and Korr caught her elbow. I accept, she said, on one condition. He comes with me. 3 months later, Korr stood in a library that smelled like old paper and stars. Sarah sat, surrounded by scholars, teaching them the language of patterns while her legs grew stronger each day. Some mornings, she still needed help. Other mornings, she walked beside him through halls that echoed with discovery instead of desperation. Outside, the galaxy still hunted. But here, in this place between wars, a girl who'd been paralyzed by choice was learning to stand. And a soldier who'd paid too much learned that mercy, like starlight, travels farthest when you're willing to carry it through the dark.